Are you playing to win or just running out the clock? In sports, the game clock drives every decision. It creates urgency, sharpens focus, and pushes players to perform their best. So what if you treated your life with that same sense of urgency? I've created an exercise to help you do just that. It's called Your Game Clock. Download Your Game Clock today at bill-burke.net/clock. It's free, it's simple yet transformative, and it could be the first step towards achieving peak performance in the areas of your life that matter the most. Remember, life is not a practice run. Every second counts, and your time is now. Welcome to another episode of the Fortitude Forum, and I am really excited to have our next guest, Ed Latimore. Ed is a former, not really so much former anymore, I'm going to ask him about this, a former professional boxer. He's a professional chess player, and he's author of the new book, Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business. Ed, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to be here. Yeah, in the intro, you're talking about the former, but not really sure. But the other thing, I'm not a pro chess player. I'm a very good chess player, but the chess community would eat me alive if I claimed to be a pro or something like that. But
You are an aspiring professional chess player.
I have a goal. For anybody listening, there's the whole ELO system or FIDE or US chess ranking all across the board. They use numbers. My goal has been for a while, but I'm learning I can't get past 1850, which is like the ceiling usually for talent. I need to sit and really study, and that'll probably get me to 2000 pretty quickly. And then 2000 is cool because 2000 is in all the chess rankings. That's like candidate mastery. Okay, they're like, okay, you're very close, but you're not quite there. But let's put it like this: at the level I play chess, the hustlers downtown and the bums that like to do this too, they know who I am and they will not play me, which is like good for them because it's a bad idea to come and bet against someone you don't know in a skill sport. That'd be like me walking up to somebody random and going, okay, or somebody walking up to somebody random going, oh, you want to have a boxing match, and they look at me and go, let's bet $1,000 on it. They don't know anything about me. And then all they know is that they've won a few amateur matches and most people don't fight. And then they hop in the ring and they find out very quickly that, oh, this was a bad idea. I'm going to lose my money. And that was the money I needed to eat. That's the other stupid thing about these street hustlers. It's like money they need to eat. But yeah, very good chess player. And
regardless of the title, sometimes your reputation on the street and among your peers is more important than that title. So I want to get into chess and all of that other stuff, but I've got to ask you because this just happened. You were a former professional boxer at the heavyweight level, but just 10 days ago, you decided to step back in the ring and you came out with a knockout victory. Tell us about that journey. What led you back into the ring and how are you feeling so fresh off of your latest fight?
yeah, it's funny the way you said that I just stepped back in. Oh man, I wish I had just woke up on the 11th and was like, you know what I'm gonna do tomorrow? Go fight. Nah, this was a plan. It had been floating around in my head in various forms since I had stopped fighting. And I'd be like, some days I'd be like 95%, like I'm going to the gym now, and 5%, I'm never touching a boxing glove, going in a boxing gym again. But 3 years ago when I got my contract to write this book, it was a big deal. And I said, okay, once I figured out what I was writing, you got to figure out how to market it. That's one of the things they have you do in the proposal. Now, it's not set in stone, but you need to have an idea. And I just was looking at comparable titles as well. And the book that kept coming up was Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. And I looked at a few breakdowns of David Goggins' strategy, and aside from going on Rogan like 3 times, one of the things that really pushed the book and the message is that he lived the principles of the book. So I said, okay, now I got a really good reason to get back in there. But that alone wouldn't have been enough. I had spent 3 years coaching and I had learned a boatload about biomechanics and how to move correctly. I'm pretty sure this is an audio only podcast, but if it's not, you can see it on the screen.
No, it's video.
Oh, video. So this is the fundamentals of biomechanics, sport and exercise. This is a thick book. full of physics, so I get to make use of my degree in understanding applied to the movement in boxing. And I was like, wait a second. A lot of people are just doing things wrong, and now this is actually a system that I put together that can really work. And I don't want to argue with boxing coaches. I don't want to argue with boxers because boxing is in the stone age, and surprised there's not a lot of people who actually sit and study about the way the body moves who are in the sport. The sport has no standard for who gets in or anything like that at the coaching level. It's not like football where like by the time you become even a position coach, you didn't play the game and likely coached under someone else at a low. It ain't like that. Literally, and I've seen it multiple times, somebody can, without a shred of in-ring experience, throw a towel over their shoulder and be a coach. So I'm not interested in arguing with these guys because they don't even understand what I'm arguing about. Instead, I'm going to go prove these ideas that I've figured out that I did not have, by the way. I didn't understand how to move, and it really put a limit on how good I could get before. And it was frustrating because I knew there had to be a way to be better. No one just understood it, and therefore no one could really teach you. You can teach a lot, but if you don't have this underlying base, you're stuck. So once I got that, I said, there's another point in favor. Next point that made me want to hop back in there, I had two lingering health issues that I didn't even really know about. One was hypothyroidism. My metabolism was like, had a break on it. And no matter what I did, I couldn't lose weight. I got my blood work booked at. They put me on 25 micrograms of leothyronine, which is just artificial T3, and 200 micrograms of selenium every day. And I'll tell you what, in 10 days, not even 2 weeks, I had dropped like 10, almost 15 pounds straight from the midsection that was fat. Because
Wow.
I'm looking at like how I'm eating, and it just I wasn't budging. I take that, boom. And that really, so now my engine is working. And then it turns out I was looking at my blood work, and my blood CO2 level just crept up to the point where it was like a warning sign on my blood work. I get my blood work checked on my own 4 times a year minimum. So I can see these things and keep this trend and watch it. Turns out that I needed an inhaler. I needed a daily inhaler. So I got on a fluticasone and propionate and salmeterol. It's like a combination. Took that. Bam. I had been training my whole pro career and a lot of my amateur career without these medical interventions. And I'm like, if I got that far without that, I'm really going to be able to cook with gas here. So that's point three. And then the last point really is one that I could live without, but it is what it is. I'm a small heavyweight. I'm 6'1". I weighed in for my fight this on the 12th, so this past Saturday, at 215. And I said it was good. I could be more ripped up, but I was pretty damn lean. My opponent was 258. And that actually is the biggest weight difference I've ever had in a fight. And I'll have to make a note of that. I didn't even think about it. But before it was like 250 and I was 215. But there's no upper limit to heavyweight, and I'm short, so I can only get so big. I'm short relative to like the heavyweight average. I'm 6'1". The average is 6'4", and I skewed to the left like an MFer. So like most of them dudes are 6'4" and taller. So I said, you know what? Let's see what happens if I drop the cruiser. Let's see how far I can go. I got a little bit of time to do this. I got all this momentum, and on top of that, because I have a record from before when I fought, it actually, I'll be able to move faster. Like, I'm not starting from scratch. They're only going to let me fight one. They actually probably won't let me fight anymore somebody with. So what the athletic commissioners do, they try and match you by experience. It might not look like that in the fight, but for a fight to get approved in most jurisdictions, most states, they're going to look at your record, and they're going to look at the guy you're proposed to fight, his record. And it's not going to matter so much at first how many wins versus losses, but how much time he's been in the ring, and then when he's lost, how he's lost. So we didn't want me to go back in there fighting a straight killer, which is what I would have had to do if this was like a year after I took time off and I was 34. But because I was 40 and I've been off almost 9 years, the commission approved a guy who, I mean, he was still, you don't sleep on anybody because you got guys over 200 pounds throwing leather did have experience. He had 15 fights. He just happened to have an upside down record. And he wasn't knocked out many times. You can get hurt. And he actually hit me with a pretty good shot in there. But it was good because he got my feeling back, being in the ring under the lights. No matter how intense sparring is, it's still not getting hit with a 10-ounce glove with no headgear. With a
Yeah.
guy who's trying to hurt you. And sparring is a little bit of learning, and a fight is hurting. So yeah, all those reasons, man, to sum that up, the book, the health, the knowledge, and not wanting to wonder what if.
Yeah, still an impressive feat to take 9 years off and step back into the ring, and not just step back into the ring, but come out with a victory. Very impressive. But I
At
want
40 years
to,
old, too.
yeah,
I was
absolutely.
actually
That's just not many people would even attempt it, let alone succeed. Love that story. Now, you've talked about how within your life, you've actually lived 4 lives. And I think this is so interesting. You've pared down really a main lesson from each one of those 4 lives. So I'm just curious, what has led you to that framework, or what did you lead you to that framework? And why was that structure so important to you in terms of how you view yourself?
So when you go through life, the idea is that you should be learning so that you become a better, wiser individual with more perspective and the ability to consider more. Because life does not get easier if for no other reason than you cross a threshold between 18 and 26 where like your parents are like, get out of here. Maybe you got good parents and they keep helping you. I didn't have that. And then you get older and then you get your own responsibilities. So it's no longer just about you, but it's about other people. And that doesn't even have to be a dependent. That could be the people you work with. And if you don't meet those responsibilities, there are consequences. And then you get to a certain point and people like they have less tolerance for you not having made progress. So life gets harder. So with that said, you got to make sure you keep learning from each level. And for me, the delineations, when I wrote that up about the lessons from each life, what I did initially in my thought process was I thought about the watershed moments in my life. The watershed moments where if I had not done this or this had not happened, but each time it was something I'd done, high agency kind of deal. If I had not done this, nothing else would be possible. So like in the first lesson in the first life, the thing that marks the big shift is when I chose to go to a high school that was across town, out of my neighborhood, away from the people that I had grown up with and the environment that I was used to. The next shift is when I decided to start boxing. That I started boxing 18 years ago. That's when I first stepped into a gym. I don't know what my life would be if I hadn't started boxing. That opened up so many doors and so many things around. But between where I went to high school and getting into boxing, there are a lot of lessons that are learned that ultimately led me to boxing. And there were a lot of lessons learned in that first life that led me to go to a different school. The next big transition point in my life is when I enlisted in the Army. And again, the things that the Army allowed me to do and set off in the rest of my life, I could not imagine being able to do those, or that I would be here without those lessons. And these are the big watershed moments that delineate everything. When I update this one day in the future, the next big watershed moment will be having my son. He's around now, and his presence it's really served. You stop thinking about everything and how it's going to help you. If it doesn't help them, the family, it doesn't really matter. And your job is to be here as a guiding light and a person to look up to, really, and also as a leader and a provider and all of these things. It's this shift, like I was saying about how the responsibility, the older you get, the more responsibilities you have, and that's a really good example of it. But that's where it came from. Each life leads to a new watershed moment. And if you're doing things correctly, those watershed moments will move you in a constructive direction. Because there's another type of watershed moment. You could go to jail, and that's going to change the course of your life too.
Yeah.
It's going to make a lot of things more difficult.
So, speaking of presence, you grew up in the projects of the great city of Pittsburgh, a city that's near and dear to my heart, but you did so without a strong masculine presence. So, I'm curious, what did the word or the idea of strength mean to you then? What was your perception of it then? And then, how has that perception changed over time for you?
No one's ever asked me something like that. And now that I think about it, I don't really think I had a concept of strength outside of, oh, I can move these weights still. But mental strength and emotional, I understood emotional discipline. You don't want to say something crazy because you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, the idea of strength to me was there was effectively not one beyond the physical idea of it. As I've gotten older and I'm able to look around at people and the world and myself in the world in relation to those people, what I'm realizing is that strength really is, in general, this idea of resisting entropy in all aspects of your life, whether that be your physical degradation or losing friends. You don't want your relationships to deteriorate, so it takes a certain level of it takes an energy output, and you need to be strong enough to have the capacity to exert that energy, whether it be mental or psychological, or in some cases spiritual, to maintain relationships, to make the right decisions daily for your family and your finances and your health. All of this is, it's very easy to do nothing, right? And to just let things happen. But if you let things happen, they're usually not going to be in your favor. Best case scenario is you break even, but you didn't really break even. You're still behind because life continues to get more challenging and you did not force yourself to adapt. You did not resist the degradation of your life. So for me, that's what strength is, an ability to resist the all encompassing, all pervasive entropy in all phases of life.
That's a great definition of fortitude and mental toughness, which is what this show is all about. And we go back to your childhood a little bit, and you mentioned or you've talked about the idea of being likable and controlling your emotions. But in that environment where survival was really the top priority, how did you develop that self awareness at really such a young age?
Fear, man. you just it all starts with fear. It's self preservation. And it's like what we tell people when they get pulled over by the cops. Your number one goal is to get home alive. Like, you deal with everything else later, because if they kill you, which they have the power to, you're not going to be able to tell your side of the story, and the law is likely going to be on their side. So there's that. There's a lot of fear of the wrong thing happening, whether that be at home or at school or in the neighborhood. So you figure out a two pronged approach. One is defensive. You learn to not you learn to treat people well. You learn to treat people well, but there's also a flip side of it, that if you're pressed, you have to show that you are not the one to be pressed. You have to fight back, because anybody who's ever dealt with any type of bullying or been in that type of situation knows that human weakness is like it's blood in the water for sharks.
Yeah.
Once they see that you're that target, now you're going to be a target. But if they know that every conflict with you is going to cost something, depending on your level of mental stability and how much you care and your training, it might cost a little, it might cost a lot, but it ain't gonna be free. And now they gotta make a cost benefit pro con list about messing with you
Hmm.
again. And so those are the two things. But the other aspect of that, the likability aspect, your life never gets easier when people. Your life never gets more difficult when people like you. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Um, Now that's not to say that there won't be more things that can tempt you or take you off a righteous path. But in terms of ease of moving through with the absence, or rather moving through life with the absence of opposition, you can eliminate a lot of opposition if people are genuinely like fond of you. So you learn how to be likable. At the very least, you learn how to not be disliked.
That's very interesting because we think about likability in terms of maybe the sales world or getting something from somebody else or advancing your career or making more money. But likability as a survival tactic, that's probably not one that a lot of people think about. Very interesting insight there. And you also use this phrase, which I love, which I think is brutally honest, and that is nobody is coming to save you. How has internalizing that truth over the years shaped your mind and maybe even more importantly, your habits?
I figured out very early through a series of events that like the way I thought about it before I put it so poetically and succinctly, the way I thought about it was that all the adults around me were just trash, varying levels of incompetence, but just not going to do what adults should do. And I didn't think of it so much as these are bad adults. It was I can do a lot better navigating the world if I don't listen to them because of these examples I had. They were just terrible examples. When we start thinking like that, and then when you're also let down repeatedly, when you're exposed to abuse repeatedly, you stop believing that the people who are supposed to be able to do something for you are going to do something for you. So it's the self sufficiency that really is born out of trauma. I say that because I'm always clear about this point. The survivor's bias will have you thinking that the best way to develop self sufficiency is to be left to the wolves. And yeah, you'll get some survivors from that, but how many people don't make it out of that? I've seen a lot of people don't, because that what I just described, that those incompetent adults, they weren't just my family; it was the people around me. And a lot of kids don't make it out for various reasons. I've carried that mindset with me my entire life, and the one thing it makes you do, it gives you a bias towards action, as my web designer once described it. So you have a bias towards action because. uh,
Us?
okay, hope you can edit that out. But if not, it's just sneeze. But the bias towards action, you never just sit around and wait for things to happen to you. You have to identify problems and attack them before they become big problems. I always tell people if you go after a problem early, you get a discount. If you wait for that problem to come to you, you pay MSRP. If you try to avoid that problem, it's eventually going to catch up because it's a problem. You just keep avoiding it. And then when it catches up, not only are you going to have to pay a penalty on top of what you got to pay, you also going to have to pay a tax. And so coming up thinking that I was the only one that could figure this thing out for myself and take care of myself and that no one was going to come to save me, it's given me an incredible bias towards action, which sometimes is not a good thing. But generally speaking, if you had to err on one side or the other, which is, and the other side, to be clear here, is not being reckless, but it would be, or not being like completely passive, it would be deliberation and thoughtfulness. You want to err on the side of action. You want to more ready fire aim than ready aim fire because you can always adjust after. And a lot of times you can only get information, you can only get feedback that's going to inform you on how to create a better plan moving forward when you go and take action. A lot of things can't be thought through. That's just the nature of life. You can't now. You should think through everything you can. I don't want to. I don't want to send that message out that reckless thought or that reckless action without any thought is preferable. But it's. I think they got this rule in the Marines, the 70% rule. Once you got about 70% sure, 70% certain it's going to work, go for it. Go for it because at that point the expected value is in your favor. Even if it's flipping a coin where seven times out of three or 7 times out of 10 you're gonna win, and that those 3 times, the mere fact that you took action is going to at least make sure you're on the front foot rather than the back foot, and you'll be in better position to adjust.
No, I love that as well. And that reminds me, your explanation there reminds me of, I believe it was, and I believe also that you're into Stoicism a little bit and weave some of that into what you teach people. But I think it comes from Marcus Aurelius. I think he said most of our suffering comes from avoidance. And I've experienced that in my own life. The longer I delay a tough decision,
You
the
just
harder it
get
gets
to
and
it.
the higher the price that I pay. So I love that answer. I want to go back just for a second to the year 2013. And that was really a transformative year for you. A lot going on. Enlistment in the military, as you mentioned, pro boxing, sobriety, even college. How did you navigate all of those transformations on all of those different levels all at the same time? What type of a challenge was that for you?
So when you say it that way, it does sound like a lie. But when I think about that year, because the year is very clear to me. Like there's the pro fight, and I'm selling tickets, and I'm actually sick while I'm selling tickets, and went into the ring a little under the weather. And then there was me learning because I enlisted on January 4th, but I didn't ship the basic until June 4th. And part of why that happened is just that the military runs on these schedules, and when I was going into the military to specialize in, the classes didn't line up with my expected end date to basic training until then. And it got sober and enlisted in college. So yeah, that sounds like a lot, but and I guess it is. When I think back on life, 2013 is probably going to be just as memorable as the last 3 years with the kid here. But as far as like how I navigated it, it all starts up here in your head, in your mind, and when you start that way with a bit of a plan in place, then every action you take supports the plan. Every action. And so it seems like each one is a start over, but they're all working in concert to achieve what I'm trying to achieve, which is a better life. I start this pro career. Well, I enlist because I'm like, I need to get a better life going for myself. So I enlist, and then I go pro because I had already put that in motion, and I'm thinking already in the future, like I go pro here, and then I end up in a better position in the future with my career. I'm away for most of that year with military training. When I come back, I gotta have to pick up sobriety because I don't want to rule my life. I come very close to that. And the reason I enlisted in the first place was to get money for school in case, so I could start school again in case this boxing thing doesn't pan out. So it's all working together, but it's really just different aspects of the same plan. And that might be why I don't think of that year as so overwhelming because to me it was all one goal.
All related. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you now teach people what you've learned. And again, you've learned some hard lessons along the way, and you've had a very diverse, eclectic life experience so far through your first four lives. And hopefully there are many more to come and many more lessons to come. But what are the core principles that you try and pour into people that you work with now?
Two main ones. One, the difficulty of something is irrelevant if it's vital to your success. And two, that given enough time and motivation, you can learn anything. And when you take those two ideas together, we can probably say it a different way. Nothing's too hard, and you can do anything because nothing is too hard. But you got to believe that. Not only do you have to believe it, but you got to be comfortable with taking action for a certain amount of time that does not necessarily reflect itself in external ways. When I went back to school, just as going all the way back, I was a terrible student in high school. I actually failed high school once the regular way, not getting all my GPA straight. And then the second time, when I got caught plagiarizing an essay in summer school to make up for the credit that I didn't have. And they were like, boom. And I had failed math big time too. So I had zero confidence in my ability to learn and definitely in math. But when I was going back to school, I looked at all the highest paying jobs and I said, okay, every job that pays well, that makes an investment in college worth it, involves math. And all the jobs with the highest customer satisfaction or employee satisfaction have math. So it looks like I got to learn math. I'm going to do this. So I started before, over a year before I went back to school, really putting in the work to build my math foundation up from arithmetic. And that you don't see any result of that for a long time. I think the first confirmation that I was doing something well, I had actually started building my math back up when I was an amateur in LA training. So that would have been 2011. And then I enlist in 2013, at the beginning of 2013, and this is important because I had to take the ASVAB, the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery. And there's a math portion. And I know I crushed the math portion because I scored a 99, which is like less than 1% of test takers get that. And I know I was only able to do that because I put a lot of work into the math. But think about that. That took, just to get confirmation that I was on the right path, that took over a year to see some result. And then I didn't even get a chance to be in a classroom setting for another year. So we're talking 3 years almost. Almost 3 years, because there's the year before 2011, then there's 2012, where I'm in 2013, and then I don't even start class until 2014 because of the way school semesters work, college, where the winter or our spring semester starts in January 2014. And then I still got to get through the classes. I don't finish my prerequisites where I had to take Calc 1, 2, and 3 until 2015. So all of this time, it took that little bit of time. It's the same with this boxing thing I just now. The confirmation of the ideas that I started putting together did not come for almost 3 years until after I started working on them. But I was diligent and I had faith that I could learn this, I could figure it out. It didn't matter how hard it was, I could get it. So I had to stick with it. So those are the ideas. And I think that if you take anything from listening to me, you take those two ideas and you internalize them, and you make sure that whatever you want to do in life, that it is, you're not going to give up, and you're going to have faith in yourself.
It's so powerful. Keep showing up even when the outcome is unclear. I think that's really difficult for a lot of people to do, but you obviously are a walking example of that. So now you're building a thriving platform. You're writing books. You're creating a voice that really resonates with people that are hungry for real talk, which I love. I think it's necessary. I think it's so underrated. What's been the biggest internal shift for you in this fourth life, this current life, that you're really the most proud of to this point?
I'm getting a lot better at consolidating what works and figuring out what works, learning to lean on parts of what I had built and done that I had not. I won't say unnatural, I just never did it. For example, promoting a book and a book launch. So you have to get comfortable asking for help. Not something that's come easy for me, but I've had to do it. And because I've had to do it, I've got some great outcomes. So really almost dismantling that mentality that I built up of no one's coming to save me. Yeah, you got to make sure it's like pushing your car down. It's if your car breaks down, right? If you just sit your ass on the side of the road, good luck getting help. But if you start pushing, people are going to be more likely to come join in and push. So when people see that I'm doing all this work, putting all this effort in, it's amazing some of the things that have happened in terms of promoting my book that I would have never thought to add, would have never thought possible. And I went into this experience thinking it was going to be, this part was going to be very difficult. Now, what I figured out is still challenging, but it's a different kind of challenge, and one that I'm very comfortable with, only because I took on an uncomfortable challenge, which was asking the people to help me in various ways, like with email or going on their show. That, like we were talking before the show with speaking, I've been on like 300 podcasts, and they were all inbound. This time, I've got 30, 35 scheduled between now and launch day, and they're all because I reached out and asked people. And it's made a huge difference in my life. I got a whole email campaign going out to promote the book in other people's email lists because I just said, hey, would you mind if I write an email, send it to your list the day of launch? You get full editorial control, but I just want to make sure I can do that. And so instead of relying on my 27,000 person email list, now collectively I should be able to get the word out to the book about the book to about 1.5 million people across all lists. That's a reach I could not have ever had. So you got to learn when your attitudes, because I built my social media platform, all the inbound, everything, right? My boxing career, the nature of boxing and how it's a solitary sport. I got very used to doing things without asking for help. That is not possible at this level of where I'm at in my life. It's just not possible. And it's
So
actually changed my relationship with my wife too. It's nice to see though.
that's so good, Ed. So good. You are a rare combination. You really are. Pro boxer, now author, chess player, not yet professional, but heading in that direction. I'm just curious, chess and pro boxing, how are those two things similar? And then how are those two things different? Do you spend time thinking about that?
I have the similarities. There's a heavy strategic element. And really, if I could sum up the similarity, I would say this: in the better the opponents, or rather the smaller, not just the smaller the gap in their skill, but the higher level their skill is, the more they have to win as opposed to not lose. What I mean by this is that when you look at lower level games, you see a lot of mistakes, and the other player is just not good enough to catch them, or they're making their own mistakes. Same with boxing. When you look at the lower levels, there are more knockouts. Because a knockout in theory shouldn't happen. It should go to decision every time. Just like in chess, what should happen in theory is that you should reach a draw every time. Which is why chess tournaments are decided over a series of games rather than just one. But when you get good, you have to win the game because no one's making mistakes anymore. Now you have to force them, outplay them. It's the same with boxing. Now the big difference is in boxing, the mistakes can be life changing. Shit, you could win the fight and your life has changed, and not in a good way. I know a guy who had to retire at 15-0 because of a detached retina. It happens. That is the nature of the beast that you decide to get involved in. That doesn't really happen in chess.
It's physical, one's not. So, Ed, just a couple more questions. This has been awesome. What's next for you? What's next in this fifth life that you're now building and creating?
In terms of projects, I'll be starting a podcast. It took me a long time to figure out how I wanted the theme and structure, but I'm going to start that. I'm working on my next fiction book and a boatload of promotion. That's like my life for the next whatever, because you don't make money off the book. You make money off the things the status that the book confers onto you if you market yourself properly. So that's what's next. And being a good father. That's pretty much it.
There you go. Again, thanks so much for being here. Tell the listeners how they can connect with you, how they can follow your next project, and of course, how can they get their hands on your newest book, Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business.
So the book is available on all platforms. One thing publishing companies do very well, and they don't do everything very well, but one thing they do very well is handle distribution. Somebody sent me a receipt yesterday. They pre-ordered it from Target. Didn't even know you could do that. But you can get the book anywhere. It's Hard Lessons from the Hurt Business. I also read the audiobook myself, which was quite an experience. But you can get the audiobook on, Audible. You get the audiobook on Audible, the ebook on Kindle, and the physical copy from anywhere. As far as where to find me, I'm Ed Latimore on every platform. My website is edlatimore.com. I'm Ed Latimore on Twitter, Ed Latimore on IG, Ed Latimore on LinkedIn, Ed Latimore on YouTube.
Thanks again, Ed. It's been so good to have you here on the Fortitude Forum. You are the epitome of mental toughness, and you've done it in a physical arena and also now in some non-physical arenas as well. So best of luck to you moving forward. Thanks again, Ed.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate it.